Okay. Don't be scared. Hmm. Oh, sweetie. Don't be scared. He's really frightened. There, that made you feel better. See? You want the grass clean? The grassy parts? Yeah, they just need, ready? Hi, it's Susie, and I'm here at Cornell University. I'm going to talk, I hope you can hear me, but I'm talking much quieter than I normally do because you can see these are our new friends, the goats that we just picked up at the subway in New York City, and they're really, really frightened, so everything I want to do is going to be very, very calm. You can see they are here in a hospital pen. We brought them here for a lot of reasons. The first reason, obviously, is starts with the story. So the story of these goats, if you haven't seen it, is we were actually contacted by Animal Care Centers of New York City in Brooklyn because these two were loose on the subway tracks. And obviously subway tracks are electrified. It's very, very scary. They could have been killed very easily. Thankfully, Animal Care Centers jumped into action along with their animal control officer. And of course, the New York City Police Department came in as well. And they were able to sedate them, so they used tranquilizers on them because when goats obviously escape from somewhere, they're very panicked, and goats are very quick. If you've been around goats, they can jump right over you. It's pretty amazing how spry they are, and these boys are young, so they're very, very spry. Right now they look very exhausted, but they were clearly frightened, and so they needed to tranquilize them to catch them so they could get them off of the tracks safely. It's very dangerous, again, for them to be there, not only for them getting hit by a train or being electrocuted, but also for the people on the train. It's a very dangerous place for them to be. So we have not named them yet, so I will refer to them as Mr. Black and Mr. Brown. Is that a good name for you guys? Okay. So we were actually called by Animal Care Centers, and our manager, Jill Tedeschi, was in New Jersey. So she contacted the stewards, and everybody took the stewards trailer, and we went into New York City to pick them up. Jill, it was really great that Jill was there because I wanted her to assess whether or not they needed medical treatment, because when they are sedated with a tranquilizer, there's always a chance that they can get too much sedation that can knock out their kidneys. Many animals die during that process. It's hard to judge how much sedation they need, and when animals' adrenaline is up, which happens a lot more with the cows, if they're still being chased after they've been sedated, they don't always go down, and then more sedation is necessary. Again, it's kind of a really hard call to make because you don't want people to get hurt, but you also want to try to save the animal. And they're kind of in a situation where the animal is very frightened when they get loose from the live market. So, and we're assuming that's where they're from. So the live markets, there's hundreds of them right now in New York City, and they're live slaughter facilities. And you're talking about millions of New Yorkers. I think every time we rescue an animal from New York City, we hear from people that live in New York City that they had no idea that these live markets are there. And part of that is because they're storefronts that are considered like butcher shops or slaughter facilities where people go and actually buy meat. And so there's this, lack of knowledge about what's actually going on in those markets and how those animals get there and the whole process. So what we've seen and we've been taking in, I think we've taken in well over 1,000 animals over the last 10 years from New York City live markets where they have escaped from those markets. So when they're bringing these trucks in, they bring tractor trailers full of stacks of cages of chickens. They bring in livestock trailers that house goats and sheep and pigs and cows, and all of these animals are being brought from where they live into New York City. So I think it's, if you live in New York City, you probably can't imagine this, but like if you came from where I live and you go into New York City, everything is just like the sounds and the smells and everything is so different from where a goat would actually have been raised and come from. In this case, we don't know again where these animals came from, but they have clearly not been handled kindly. They've been handled, but definitely not with any kindness. This boy's ear, hi sweetie, you can see has been cut off like straight at the tip. He hasn't, you have a hole, and he's the most frightened, so I'm gonna not, you can see how they're so clinging together right now, but you can see that his ear has been cut off at the tip. It's a very straight cut. And this is, Mr. Black is the one that's the sickest. He actually has a fever. He's had a very like snotty nose. The way that he's presenting, it's more likely a virus. They're very prone to something called shipping fever. That's a high stress from like the shipment of these animals. So if you've seen the animals that we take in from New York City, some of them come in with ear tags from as far away as Texas. Actually, we have one from Utah, which makes no sense, which means that they were shipped that far in a trailer. So the stress level is very, very high for a lot of these animals when they come, for all of these animals when they come into the city. Once those trucks arrive at the slaughter facilities, they're smelling the smells of animals who have been killed. It's very, very frightening. They're hearing other animals. So they have a flight response. These are prey animals. And go ahead, Sam. Sam's been wanting to ask me a question.
What do you think these...
I'm just chatting up a storm.
What do you think the tears in their ears represent, and would you say that they are farmed animals? Can you go more into detail about what these ear injuries that they have mean?
I don't know. I mean, this is the problem. You can always speculate on anything. And I don't like to speculate because I read about, anytime something happens, I try to read about why it could happen. I've also heard that a lot of goats, when they're born and their ears are flapped, that they actually, some people do cut off the tips, but only one of his ear tips are cut. We've heard things about it makes their adrenaline go up before they're slaughtered, which I would, again, none of this would all be speculation, and I don't want to speculate. But I do, just from their behavior, this fear and like they're really clinging together. The shape that they're in, as dirty as they are, my guess is that they definitely, escaped from some place where they were most likely going to be slaughtered.
And to the health issues that they have, are they indicative of other farm animals that we've seen that have been raised for slaughter?
Yes. So a lot of the animals that we get, and the good news is they don't have the condition caprine arthritic encephalitis. We've done blood work. We're waiting for blood work on caseous lymphadenitis, which is CL. That's something that we see in almost all of the goats we've taken in from New York City, the sheep and the goats from the live markets. I don't think we have any that we've taken in that haven't had caseous lymphadenitis, so we're waiting on that test, which is fine. They can live with that, and we can deal with that disease. On the farm, we have areas where the animals are carriers of that disease. He's falling asleep, which is really sweet. They're so exhausted, and you're so tired. But we're also waiting on fecal results. The animals that we take in from the city usually have very high parasite loads, which it can be very dangerous for them, but also for our resident animals, which is why once we get them home, they will be quarantined until they're 100% healthy, which is extremely important when you're taking in animals. Right, my friends? The biggest thing that makes me think they're from the live market is how scared they are. There's only been a couple animals that we've taken in from the live markets that aren't absolutely terrified. That includes Jordan and Mandy, and they had to be animals that had been raised for 4-H and probably sold during a 4-H fair and then sent to the live markets, which is heartbreaking because some kid probably raised them and loved them because they were the two friendliest that we've brought in. Most of the time that's not the situation.
So for people who are just joining in, where are we all right now, and can you tell us about the care that they're getting here?
We are at the greatest place on the planet if you're a sick farm animal. So we are at Cornell, at Nemo Animal Hospital, large animal hospital at Cornell University. And oh, you're coughing. I'm sorry. And this is the best place to do, especially triage care, care like emergency care. We bring like half dead calves from stockyards and animals that are. I remember when we brought Elliot here. Elliot was another live market animal who was almost dead and had been thrown out at the back of a live market and left there to just die. And he wandered off and was so sick. I'm so surprised he made it. And he was here for weeks under their care because they have the ability here to do emergency care. They have the best doctors in the country are here. I think it is such an amazing place for us to be close to because if they did have problems with tranquilizing, like with the tranquilizers, and they had gotten sick and they were, going into renal failure or anything, this would be the place to be. And so that is always our first stop, is to come here just to make sure that they're okay. And we do take them sometimes directly to our farm, but I've never taken an animal that's been tranquilized directly to the farm just in case there's something much more serious happening, because we don't want to take them home and have them go into renal failure in Watkins Glen and have to drive them back. And here they get round-the-clock supportive care. I mean, we can do the same things there, but we don't do the diagnostics where we are. We can stay with them all the time, but we can't save their kidneys at the shelter, right?
We have a couple of comments coming in
Yeah.
from Rami on Facebook Live. First of all, Rami used to live in New York City and
Oh,
had no
fantastic.
idea that these live markets exist.
Yeah.
Also, surprised that like when you describe all these various parasites and diseases that sheep and goats carry, wondering like how can people continue to eat them? Like why would you say that people would continue to eat animals who are known to carry these diseases?
Well, I think part of the problem is, and you have to remember, too, that when people are going to these markets and they're seeing them alive, they're assuming they're okay. And disease, any animal can carry a disease. And that's not, most of these diseases are not diseases they would test for before they're slaughtered anyway. So it's a tough one. That's why I eat plants. I don't eat meat. But I've seen animals. I mean, the best examples we have are Joey that came from New York City, arrived with a CL abscess in his thyroid that was as big as a grapefruit. It was absolutely disturbing, but it does happen, and it's hard when you see these animals. Like if I look at them, I've been around farm animals for 25 years, so when I look at them, I can tell they don't feel well and they're sick. But most people aren't coming in and saying like, oh wow, that's a sick farm animal. They're seeing them, their adrenaline's up, they're usually standing up, they're not lying in a corner. Some of them are very sick and it's obvious. But again, unless you know what you're looking for, it wouldn't be quite so obvious. So I don't understand why that happens. I do think that a lot of them even get sick in the process of coming to the slaughter facilities.
And MJ is actually commenting that this is the second time in a week that goats were found loose in Brooklyn. Like, how pervasive is this?
It's pretty pervasive because you have to remember again that when you're unloading these animals, and I'm not kidding, like in the last 10 years, we've taken in over 1,000 animals from the markets that have escaped. And a lot of times it's crates fall off of trucks and the crates open up and the chickens all get loose and then they're wandering through New York City. We've taken in sheep that have just been wandering down the street. We've taken in cows, obviously. Frank the bull was from the same exact area. They get loose, they run, they're panicked, and because they're panicked, especially with the larger animals like the bull, like any of the bulls, people are going to get hurt, and they do get hurt. And it's because the city really isn't a great place for animals that are raised on farms. It's just not. It's dangerous for them. It's dangerous for people when they get loose, and it's just so much fear. The amount of fear that they're going through in that process is devastating. And you can see these are two very exhausted goats because they are scared, but they're not. I'm not doing anything to them, but they're definitely just exhausted right now.
And how old would you say these guys are?
From looking at them, especially with their horns, probably 6 months, maybe a little bit older, and they're neutered males. So yeah, they're about 6 months old, and they're very greasy and dirty, which will change very soon. I can't wait till they're at the farm. Once they're at the farm, it's going to be amazing because they'll be on grass. And the key thing, and you have to remember that this is the key thing, most of the animals we get that are running loose in New York City are alone. And these are herd animals. And they're flock animals, and they don't want to be alone. They need to feel safe. And the only way to feel safe, which is why they are suctioned together like they're Siamese twins right now, is because they only feel safe when they're with their own people. They don't feel safe like just being by themselves. So yeah, it's been really amazing. It's amazing to see that they have each other. I think that makes them a little bit braver than some of the ones we've seen. But when we take in a single animal from the city, the biggest issues are getting them to calm down. They throw themselves against walls. They'll throw themselves against fences to get away from us. So these two, are tired, but they also have each other. And once they get to the farm, you'll have a lot of other friends, goaty friends, my little goaty friend.
For people who are just starting in, can you tell them about Farm Sanctuary and the work that we do and what kind of life they'll expect to have there?
Well, on our sanctuaries, we rescue, and you have to remember too, I think that the most important thing about this is these two are very, very lucky. They're very lucky. There are over 9 billion farm animals that are killed every year for food in the U.S., over 50 billion worldwide. So you're talking about billions of animals every year, and these are two. So the percentage of the animals that we're able to save is very, very low. So rescue is one element of this. What these two are going to have is an amazing life. Their story will be their story forever. They are victims of an industry where they were going to be slaughtered, but also they escaped. They have such a strong will to live. And I'm so glad that the two of them escaped together, because that is really awesome, because they'll always have each other forever. They'll have a family. One of the things that's great about the sanctuary is that at Farm Sanctuary, we will hook them up with animals that will be perfect for them. We're very careful. We try to get to know them first before we just put them in a herd, because we want to find animals that they will get along with based on their personalities. And from there, they'll have a big herd and they'll have a family. And that's one of the best ways to make them feel safe, way more than it is having us. Like, we're kind of secondary. We're good about feeding, but that's, and we take care of them medically. But what they really, really need is to be with each other. So yeah, we're very happy that they'll be coming to Farm Sanctuary. They're chewing cud right now. See this chewing? It's pretty awesome.
We have a question coming in from Barbara asking if there's some kind of hotline or way that people can contact us if, for people who live in the New York City area, if they ever witness a farm animal emergency, what can they do?
Oh yeah, well first of all, our email is shelter@farmsanctuary.org, but they can also contact our main phone line, which is 607-583-2225. And if you hit 0 during business hours, it will get you to somebody. And there's a whole bunch of prompts to tell you what to push for that. And you can reach out to anyone at Farm Sanctuary if you know somebody that knows somebody at Farm Sanctuary. But yeah, you can always reach us at those two, the phone and obviously our email address. Right?
Can you elaborate more on our collaboration with Cornell and what they've learned in seeing these farm animals and treating them, and how this can help spread the importance of farm animal awareness and how we can help them live the kind of lives that they do at Farm Sanctuary?
Well, definitely. So the thing that's very different about what we do, and most of the animals that will come through any large animal hospital or farm animal hospital, is that we have them from usually sometimes day one, and an animal that, especially like say a day-old calf is down and sick and dying, if a farm, someone that runs a farm and is using the animals for profit isn't going to spend like $2,000 or $3,000 to save a calf. So that's something that they get to learn, which is really amazing, because we put a lot of money into them, because what we're trying to say about every one of the animals that comes through our sanctuaries, but also all animals, is that they're individuals that deserve individualized care. So the difference between a sanctuary and a farm is, number one, the care that they get as individuals. So if they're sick when they come in, they get the care they need to get better. If they're sick when they're elderly, which farm animals don't get elderly if they're on a farm because they're slaughtered, or their value is no longer, they're not productive enough, or they're not laying enough eggs, or they're not having babies, or they're not producing enough milk. All of those things don't matter to us, because we see them as individuals that just deserve love and care, medical care. Oh, you're going to chew your cud good. Medical care, but also psychological care. Like we want them to be happy and feel safe. So when they go into one of our herds, they're obviously not going to go into a herd where they're picked on by other goats. They're going to be in a place where they feel safe and secure. They'll get every single solitary thing that they need from the day they arrive until the day they pass away. And that's the difference. So Farm Sanctuary sees them as individuals, and we will see them as individuals until they are old. So what happens at Cornell is animals that they'll never see past the age of slaughter or past the age of production, they now see. So we'll bring in a cow that's like 20 years old who needs a dental. That's pretty awesome. We have dentals done on older pigs. That's not something that's ever happened. So the collaboration that we have is one of also learning and saying, like, these animals are individuals and they deserve, just like your dog or your cat or you or anyone else, they deserve the care they need, and that might just be having their teeth done. So that's the difference, and it's been a really fantastic relationship, because now there's medical treatment for animals with geriatric issues. There's medical treatment, through Nemo Hospital is amazing. And if you go online, you can read about, the pig Nemo. That's who, that's where that name came from. And that was a pig, I think, that had cancer. I don't want to quote all of it, but the whole thing is that someone saw a farm animal as an individual and gave them treatment that they wouldn't get if they were seen as an animal used for production. And at the sanctuary, they're just members of the family, and that's how we treat them.
Amy wants to know if you think these guys know they're safe now.
They definitely know they're safe, because they're not panicking. Because I sat down, like, they were actually much friendlier when they're through the fence, because they at least, I think, had that barrier. While I've been in here, they're doing the trick that you do when you're a little kid, when you're like, I can't see you, so you can't see me. So they're facing this way. They're not looking at me. Like, when I put my hand out, you can see, like, they're still like, you're not there. So they're still scared. But yeah, they're still very, very scared. But they definitely aren't as scared as many of the animals that we've brought in that are throwing themselves. And Aisha's I think the best example. We brought in a sheep a few years ago that escaped, or that was brought to us from a live market, and she was so frightened that she would actually hurt herself when you came in. So you'd have to be so careful just walking in with her, because she would throw herself against the wall. Because you do have to remember too that when a flock of animals or a herd of animals is brought into the city for slaughter, they've seen their people killed a lot of times. So that has to be very devastating. I've been in there and seen them killed in front of other animals. It's not a place that wouldn't be frightening if you were part of a flock or a herd where that was happening.
You question earlier if something like thunder shirts that are helpful for dogs, can goats wear them? Would they be helpful?
I think this is the thunder shirt. This is thunder shirt for this one. I think that might be frightening, because the thunder shirts are used for dogs. Dogs are actually not prey animals. Prey animals are very different. And the feeling of being like trapped, I think, is actually much scarier. I don't want to make that statement because it might be absolutely true. I've never, I've held animals when they first come in, but I think they're more paralyzed with fear when we're doing that. So we try, more than anything, to just let them have space and let them be themselves. And then they start to come up to you. We have, the sheep are the best example of that. Most of the sheep like run and like cluster together and hide in corners when you first get them. And if you just give them space and you kind of sit and let them work it out, they come up and they start to smell you, and they're curious. They see animals. Once they join our flocks, they'll see animals that like us, and so they'll come around as well. But yeah, these two are, the reason I'm not spending a lot of time petting them is because I know they don't want me to. And that's okay, because that's their choice, right?
We had a question come in from explore.org if farm animals like these goats can experience depression.
Oh yeah, they definitely experience depression. So what we see, especially with death, we're going through it right now. We just had the euthanasia of Benedict, and Chucky is still very depressed. And the depression comes in so many different forms, because you have to remember that prey animals can't necessarily slow down. If they're wild animals and they're prey animals and someone dies, they can't stay with the body and mourn and do all those things, because then they're vulnerable to being attacked by someone. At the sanctuary, where they feel much safer, especially those that have been at the sanctuary their whole life, they have a tendency to be more vocal about their mourning. The cows are extremely vocal about mourning, but they're also larger animals. With the goats, what we see is depression. We see them go off feed. We see them getting very quiet. Chucky has always been super playful and loves to play with people and with Benedict, and he's not playful right now at all. So yes, they experience and grieve, and they don't grieve exactly like us. They're not going to like cry and throw themselves, onto the ground and, do the things that necessarily we do. But they're not the same as us in every way, and that's okay. That's awesome, actually. But once you get to know them, you will definitely see how they grieve, and it's very, very sad. And one of the biggest sadnesses, even for the staff, is not just the loss of the animal for us. It's watching the animals that are left behind and how they do grieve, and it's very difficult to watch sometimes.
A lot of people are very moved by their story, and many, of course, want to help. What is the number one way that people can help our two friends here and farm animals just like them?
Well, there's lots of ways to help. One of the best ways to help would be to be vegan. That would be number one. Number two, there's lots of ways to help, but right now we actually have a fund, a vet care fund, because a lot of what we do clearly requires money. Like this is not a free stay in this accommodation suite. It's very high accommodations. When they have to have diagnostics and they have to have treatments and they have to have round-the-clock care, even when they come home, all of that's going to continue. Our vet fund allows us to take in these animals, and animals in far worse shape than this, from rescue situations where we're saving them from a place that they aren't being taken care of, and they do require medical intervention. So our vet care is for all of the thousands of animals that we take care of. Right now we have over 1,000 resident animals at all of our locations, and they require daily care, like not just feed, but they require veterinary care when they get sick, and they require medical care, antibiotics, pain medications, all different types of medical care during their time with us at Farm Sanctuary.
So there are also people who would like to visit these guys and help out. Can people volunteer on the farm even if they don't have any large animal experience?
Yes, there's lots of ways to volunteer. We get a lot of volunteers that come to the farm and do barn cleaning. Some of our more permanent volunteers actually have done, like feeds and that type of thing. Oh, I know his ears are really itchy. We're gonna have to see what this is about. But yes, we have volunteer opportunities, and we have one of the most amazing intern programs. Our interns are fantastic. We couldn't survive without them, actually. And they stay. Oh no, it's okay. You want me to help? No. Our interns actually stay on site. Right now we have 6 interns in Watkins Glen, and they help with the day-to-day animal care and cleaning. They don't do the medical care, but they do feeds. They take care of the animals that are isolated or quarantined. There's so many things that they get to do on the farm. They help clean the habitats that the animals have. Oh yeah, you are definitely scared. So we... And you can see they're kind of thin too, these guys. So we do have great volunteer opportunities. And again, with animals like this, one of the opportunities that we do have is we do sometimes have people that just come in and sit and allow them to get used to just having people around that aren't going to annoy them and try to touch them and try to catch them and try to pet them and try to do all the things that are frightening to them. I know. Yeah, we got a little ways to go on the medical.
We have a follow-up question from Barbara about how you were talking about animals that go through so much. How do you and our staff take care of our own emotions and grief when we deal with a lot of these issues and what we see them go through?
Well, the saddest part is it's hard, and I'm not going to lie and say that oh, we're great, because we have so many things that happen on the farm. We have losses through death, even losses through adoption or placement are very hard on staff, because when you take on, like, these two are going to be very popular with people. Right now, it's going to go really slow, but you fall in love with them. They're part of our family. So with any change that happens, if they do end up getting sick or they do end up having something that we haven't found out about, it is a very emotional thing to lose them. We actually have had grief counselors come in. We do secondary trauma workshops. We do those types of things. But in all reality, the job itself, it's really sometimes never enough. It's no different than any job where you're caring for, in some cases it's like hospice care. When you're caring for elderly animals, that you've known, like, I've been at Farm Sanctuary for over 18 years now. Like, some of those animals I've known since I got to Farm Sanctuary. So, and it's no different with anyone that works there. You've known these animals your whole time there, and when something happens, obviously, it's devastating because they are like our family. So we work all the time trying to figure out new and better ways to deal with grief, and we're not. I don't know how to be great at it. I think for some people it's harder than for others, and we continue to try to learn. Just like every year we learn new things medically, and we learn new ways to treat the animals. We're also trying really desperately to learn new ways to deal with and treat our own people too, because we want them to stay, because the animals rely on them 100%. So we try to take care of them too. I say we're actually, it's much easier to take care of the animals, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that human emotions are very, very difficult, and it is a very hard thing to watch as people are very sad, and we do go through it and in waves sometimes. Certain deaths are much, much more difficult.